Hey guys, GhazzyTV here with another build guide showcase. Today we're going to showcase a Death's Oath Occultist build guide. And let me tell you, it's freaking amazing.
What is going on, guys? It's Yoji. And before this Swedish pirate over there starts rambling about his new build, let me chime in real quick, because I know Ghazzy makes a ton of builds, and lots of good build guides have come out recently on this channel, which is why you should definitely subscribe, by the way. I am here to warn you about this new build. Because it is a scam. Yep, that's right.
What?
It is a misleading build concept that will try to make you believe that this is a Death's Oath character. But oh no, we're not falling for this one. This is clearly a Profane Bloom build, utilizing the Occultist Ascendency to make enemies explode for percentage of their life as chaos damage, creating awesomely orgasmic pop explosions every time an enemy dies. But how do I know this? Because Ghazzy himself told me that he actually hates walking simulator type righteous fire-like damage over time aura builds, so the only reason he is using the death aura skill is to proc the explosions without pressing buttons, because he is a lazy shitter. And don't let him tell you this is a hipster build, because every Death Oath setup looks exactly the same. But now that your viewers have been warned about your treacherous plans, you may commence presenting your very unique take on the build, Mr. Ghazzy Television.
Yeah, okay, sure. It's Joji. Thanks so much for your kind words for this build guide. It is true. I'm not a big fan of playing Righteous Fire like damage over time builds. Which is also why I haven't really bothered making a Death's Oath, because they've been somewhat generic. However, I've been having a lot of fun making a Profane Bloom build on the Occultist, utilizing the Death's Oath build. My previous build with the Herald of Decay sparked the interest of doing this. I think a lot of people enjoy playing this type of build. I made a CI version, which is, as Joji is referring to, the most generic way of doing it. However, there's a few things that has been pretty nice that you can do for higher budget, such as the minimum frenzy charges and whatnot. Joji pretty much covered everything, so how about we just dive into the gameplay footage, boys, and hit that goddamn like button if you like this video. Let's dive into showing some gameplay footage of this build and see how it works in a tier 16 map, including the Guardian bosses. The build does handle things like endgame bosses, and it's not really designed for it, because it's kind of a clear speed design build. Because it generally just runs through content, and there we go. Basically, you're just supposed to run through the maps with the build, which is very straightforward. But despite this, the build is able to do things like Elder, Shaper, Uber Elder without any major issues. However, you could make the build better to handle those bosses if you drop down on your generic clear speed. Now, this is something I did not want to do for this build, so here we are with the idea of playing this build as a clear speed oriented build. It's pretty nice to play, pretty comfortable, satisfying with the Profane Bloom explosions, and for the most part you're just running. Gonna skip this pump unless it has a boss. If it doesn't have a boss, we're gonna skip it for the sake of showing you some more footage and the actual boss in here. Doesn't really matter. It's pretty easy to do the blights with this build. Bosses is even easier, to be honest. You just make sure you spam that blight on them. And that's basically it when it comes to that. Alright, let's kill this guy as well. So that's basically it. You pop your flask, you pop your Withering Staff, and then you just run. And then you run a little bit more. And, you know, you can call yourself Force Gump or whatever you want to name your character. It doesn't really matter. And this is a Pit of the Chimera. This is the only troublesome fight. So this one is the hardest of the Guardian bosses and whatever fight you'll encounter with this type of build. To some degree, you could argue for the Lightning Elder Guardian to be tough as well. Basically, you want to make sure you see where he does his attack, dodge the red thing, and then you want to do this. And what you want to do is, in this phase, you want to use all your damage modifiers from the flask, which in this case is the Witchfire Brew, Cinder Swallow, and the Sulfur Flask to be the flask that you use. And in this phase, to make this fight as easy as possible, is actually to save your Granite as well as your Heat Flask. Now, I don't have adrenaline rolled flask, so you got to keep that in mind. But that's about it. So in this phase, I have Withering Staff, and that's basically used for this so that you can run through that as fast as possible to avoid dying to that shitty face. That's basically the only thing you need to think about. So again, we're back. I see that I have a Quicksilver Flask ready to do this, which will trivialize that entire face for you and minimize any risk of dying. So that's the only thing you have to think about with this build to make sure that you can handle this specific boss. And that's really it. It's really straightforward and easy to play. And usually I want to make sure that when this guy spawns, I have the damage flask for it. It's not really necessary, but I want to kill it fast because it does do some damage to you depending on the map modifiers. And we're back on this face, damage flask. Make sure that you see where he attacks. Pop the shit, have a Vaal Disc if you need to. And then, you know, go ham on the damage again. Dodge that shit, because that shit hurts. And we're back on this. And again, I see that I have Withering Steps going to be ready. I see my my Speed Flask are ready for it. So everything's fine. And then kill this one last so we get the boss in here. Now I didn't do that this time. But there's a few ways you can make content easier on you. So you don't have to worry about it too much, to be honest. This guy's pretty easy. And killing the last one. Now I don't have all disc for this one, so if he goes into the face, it's going to be a little bit tricky. And dodge that, and we're done. So that's basically how easy you can handle Chimera. And since this map was pretty fast, I'm going to show you one more, and this time going into the Minotaur map instead. So basically what I'd like to try to do when I use versus Chimera is to save the Speed Flask and Withering Step to strictly use that for that phase alone. And I usually want to hold off on my Vaal Discipline till I drop below 50% in that phase. And if that happens, then I have that as my panic button, because if you're unlucky, he might spawn in the very last pool of smoke, right? But make sure you actually enter the smokes and the smokes disappear if you've entered them, right? And that's basically how you deal with the Chimera. Every other boss in this game, except the Lightning Eradicator Elder Guardian, is dealt with by slowing them down to an obnoxiously slow movement speed and action speed, which is obviously counteracted by map modifiers such as turbo mods, making them faster attacks, movement, than cast speed. Still manageable to do because you don't really need it, but it's really nice, and that's thanks to the hinder effect as well as temporal chains that we're being cursing on the enemies. Let's see if we get a boss this time. Come on, no boss. Okay, no, fuck that then. That's about it. Ooh, there was a box up here. Pop it. So yeah, the build is very straightforward. It's easy to play. It's easy to gear. I wouldn't really recommend it as a league starter because the state of this character is a little bit more of a character's gear that is using things that are more available or easier access later down in the league. But you can do this as a league starter. It just won't be as effective early on until you can afford the big pieces. So this boss is pretty simple. Don't stand in the pool. Wait for him to go to underground. When he does, just make sure you don't stand in the pool. Well, that's gonna happen. And then you do this. And when he does that you should move from before it slams. So that's the slam you should step away from, basically, to handle this boss. Because that and the underground effect is the things that will kill you. So we see when he goes underground, he's up. And then we can go in. He does the slam again. Stay out of it. You can even dodge the attacks if you want to. If he goes underground, just step away from it and go kill him. So it's very straightforward if you don't tank the slams there. It's just stupid of me to do that. So basically, when he does a slam, make sure you are away from it. When he goes underground, step away from his line of path. And if you want to, you can dodge his attack. Now, the dodging of the attacks is not necessary. Even if he crits with 7k HP, you should survive it. But you should try to dodge it if you can. However, it is more or less always tankable depending on the map modifiers. This one had increased crit, making the crit on those attacks pretty nasty. So it shouldn't be something I should look into tanking, as you noticed on the slam as well, for example. I'm pretty sure that crit me, because I've survived it before. But either way, just try to stay away from that shit, and you should be more than fine. The Phoenix map is the same thing. The boss is pretty straightforward as well there. I mean, we can actually... No, wait, because I already did it for the Elder. Right. You slow him down so much, you just step away from the fire explosion. So first things first, kill all the bandits. Pantheons, matter of personal taste. I'm using Solo Lunaris because we already have Brine King effect through our Vile Bash Shield. We can't be stunned while we have Energy Shield. So now the Brine King is only for freezing, but I always have a Heat Flask for that. So I'm using Solo Lunaris, and it's basically just to have dodge attacks if you've been hit recently, and physical damage reduction for each enemy near you, and you also get the movement speed. So mainly I'm using this for the movement speed increasement, but you know, Pantheons are a matter of personal taste. I have an upgraded Solar Tower for immunity to poison, which is whatever. I could use anything else, to be honest, and it's just a matter of personal taste of how you want to play it. The character's gear, very straightforward as well. Obviously, we're going to use the Death's Oath. Hallelujah. What a surprise. Something to note with this is that you do not need it to be 6-linked. You just need 6 sockets on it, which makes coloring it very easy. You can either do so by coloring it using the socket strategy to basically make 2 green and then socket into 2 socket, 3 socket, 2 socket, 3 socket till you get a red, then 4 socket till you have a blue, 5 socket till you have blue, 6 socket till you have blue. But you could be in a risk of losing out on that. You could also just use 2 green recipe till you hit 2 green and a red, which I guess would be cheaper, to be honest. But you don't need 6 links on it. The other unique items that I'm using is a allelopathy. This is to have a level 22 blight skill in a pseudo 5 link, because you can have 4 supports for it. And in this case, it doesn't need to be linked either, because the item grants the ability, so you don't need to have the links. They're actually non-linked right now, and they all work, as you can see here, with the supports being added to my blight. And the last 2 uniques is actually a Witchfire Brewflask for the Despair Curse, to not have that reserved on your mana, and then a Cinder Swallow. I use this for some extra sustaining, and I chose to take the role with increased movement speed, since we're most of the cases we're just running through the maps like this, and everything's dying around us. This green pool you see here is actually Withering Steps, and not the Death's Oath, which some people on stream has mistook it for. The other items we're using, I'm going to go through them. I did invest a little bit more currency than I needed on this build for the fun of it. Basically, I'm using a crystal belt. I would recommend trying to get some strength on this belt if you can, because we have plus 60 strength on the tree. But some crystal belt for energy shield and strength. I'm using rings with minimum frenzy charges. This is not needed, but it does help the speed and a little bit of damage, but not really needed. You can easily have strength instead to avoid spending that on the tree to keep the budget down on the build. And it's just energy shield and resistances. Same thing with the other ring. I have a minimum frenzy charge, resistances, and energy shield. Amulet, there's 2 different options. You can either go with a lot of increasement to energy shield. I don't even have % energy shield on this. I have a minimum frenzy charge, which I could have had even more strength on from the amulet. And there is a chaos damage over time multiplier. Now this is an Elder mod only. Pretty hard to get as we encounter as we're trying to craft it. So if you're trying to get this, I would recommend actually buying something like it if you really want to push the budget on the build up even higher. I do have allocation of Champion of the Cause. Now here's the little tricky piece which made this build cost a little bit more for me personally. Champion of the Cause is down here and gives you increased effective aura skills by 12% and some extra mana reservation. Now this is because I'm using Aspect of the Spider, which I'm going to talk about. It's not needed, and without that you don't need Champion of the Cause, but I would need Champion of the Cause. This is actually the node that gives you the most damage. However, you can use other nodes like Dirty Techniques, which is over here. Gives you a ton of damage because it's damage over time multiplier. You also have the possibility to go Hunter's Gambit if you want to oil that one instead. Gives you again 10% chaos or damage over time multiplier. So there's a few different options that you can go for. You could even go for more energy shield if you want to. Some people suggested the side node called Tranquility. Let's see if we can find that real quick. It's up here. Gives you 5% energy shield and Transfiguration of Soul, which gives you spell damage based off your energy shield. And with my current build, I would be getting about 62% increased spell damage from that node. It does not affect Death's Oath. It does affect your Blight though, so keep that in mind. The spell damage only affects your Blight and not your Death's Oath. You have to focus on Chaos and damage over time effects. So, Spider talk. This helmet is pretty dope. I crafted it with Aberrath fossils and Dense fossils. It's pretty easy to get at least 200 energy shield with nearby enemies have -9 chaos rest. The fossils themselves are very cheap if you want to craft it yourself. I did go overboard and try to get one with over 300 energy shield and an open suffix, which took some time, just to have the Aspect of the Spider. And that's why we're using Enlightened support gems, and that's why we're using Champion of the Cause as well. This is not something that you necessarily need. You could have a Blight enchant on a helmet before you start crafting if you want to, so that's perfectly fine as well. Shield, I have a pretty crazy shield at the moment. This is again because we don't have that much focus on energy shield from neither the amulet, for example, or the fact that we are using skill tree points to get strength rather than having that sorted elsewhere. So basically just a high energy shield. You can get some resistances on it, which would be really nice as well. And then you have the boots, which is basically just movement speed plus resistances and high energy shield. In my case, because of the lack of resistances, my gear proved to be a difficult solution for me to get due to the choices of these, for example, and the lack of strength. I actually only have 110 energy shield, which is perfectly fine, but you can go as high as 200. If you short resistances on other pieces, like a lower energy shield with more res on, you can even get up to 200 ES, and you can use a pair of boots called Syntrek, which goes up to 180 energy shield, but they don't have any resistances. And that's those pieces. The weapon is an exact replica of what you would use for a build like Bane, Soul Rend, ED Contagion kind of build. You want to have chaos damage over time multiplier, and then there's a kind of a limitation of what type of modifiers you can get on a wand. So multi-crafting is obviously the best choice for this, giving you the access to bench crafting increased chaos damage, both as a prefix and a suffix, because if I hold down Alt, you can see that I have a prefix ranging 45 to 54%, and I have a suffix going to 13 to 16%, adding up to a 62% of this current show of this weapon. And then you can craft increased damage over time, and then I just added cast speed with chance to gain Arcane Surge when you kill an enemy, and that's because of the links we have on the Death's Oath. So we're going to talk about the links real quick. I have Arcane Surge. And the reason I have a 2020 Arcane Surge in this, because Death's Oath is something that you never actually use. Just equipping it will start this degen Death Aura skill, right? Arcane Surge gives the tag of spell basically to the skill, more or less, allowing it to be supported by other support gems which would not otherwise be able to support it. In this case, we're talking about getting efficacy, void manipulation, swift affliction, and less duration, and this is handled thanks to the Arcane Duration. I think it's duration actually that is being inherited for the less duration for the build, allowing you to do more damage. And by having Arcane Surge, it means that the skill itself will deal more spell damage when you have Arcane Surge, which is why I wanted to do something like this to avoid forcing me to have some mobility skill with Arcane Surge, like Flame Dash linked with Arcane Surge, which is perfectly fine to do as well, but something like this makes it a bit more comfortable to play, in my opinion. So I'm going to go through the gems right now, but keep in mind, I am using Aspect of the Spider, which is why I have Enlightened gems. This is not something you need, but it is in the PUB, linked to the descriptions below. I'm using Malevolence, Flame Dash, Discipline, which is a Vault Discipline, together with Enlightened level 4. Now, you don't need this if you don't use the Spider Aura. The Spider Aura is not that big, but it does help a little bit if you want to go crazy with the budget on this build. The other links we have is a Portal, Blasphemy, Enlighten again, with the Temporal Chains. Now, you only need level 3 Enlighten thanks to Champion of the Cause, which is expensive to oil. So again, I'm going to cut the budget of the build, remove the Aspect of the Spider, and you will remove the need of Enlighten supports. And the other 4-link is the Blight, which is again not 4-linked, just an Infused Channeling, Efficacy, Control Destruction, and a Swift Affliction for most damage. This makes the Blight do about 100,000 Shaper DPS per stack, which is pretty dope. And it also provides Hinder and Wither because of the tree, utilizing Spreading Rot, which allows my Blight to apply Wither stacks. My Withering Step applies Wither stacks, and we're going to talk about the Ascendency Node soon, which also applies Wither stacks. So you're going to reach quite fast a high amount of Wither stacks to do even more damage, which is why I'm calculating the damage in the PUB with 15 stacks Withered. The 3 links we're using is a increased duration, efficacy, withering step. This is just to increase the duration of the movement speed increase and withering application debuffs, because it applies to 6 withering debuffs every time an enemy that enters the area, which is 6 of this stack, which is very, very smooth. And as soon as you enter and an enemy comes close to you, that's 7 stacks. You blight it a little bit and you'll have very fast up to 15 stacks. I think it takes like 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, I think, to get 15 stacks on an enemy. The other 3 link is a cast damage taken, just standard, Immortal Call, increased duration. I did choose to go with a higher level cast damage taken. It's not something I usually do, but I did choose to do it with this build. That's the unique item for this build. The last unique item you could use, to be honest, which is optional, there's a couple of options, and that's a Watcher's Eye Jewel. I'm using a damage over time multiplier when you're affected by Malevolence. This is a very cheap Watcher's Eye. You could use something like Discipline having a faster start of Energy Shield recharge, and you could have a Watcher's Eye with both of these, which would work really well as well. So that's all the uniques. So let's talk about the Ascendency Gnomes. First off, you want to go to Vile Bastion. This allows you to not be stunned when you have energy shield, and it gives you a ton of energy shield, and you also regen when you kill enemies, which is helping you sustain your energy shield pool. Then you have Profane Bloom. This allows you, thanks to the Blasphemy Temporal Change and the Witchfire Brew Flask, because we have double curses through Whispers of Doom, allows you to explode them. That's why you see these pretty purple explosions all over the place, which is helping you create a more generic high clear speed of the build. And this is also something to keep in mind for something like Blight encounters. When you see a boss spawn, I would recommend waiting with killing the boss till there's a lot of enemies around it, because as soon as you go in to kill the boss, all the enemies that will explode around it will deal a lot of damage to the boss. Can, in some cases, just instantly give them. It's really nice to see. So that's the way I play this build versus Blight bosses encounters, for example. The other nodes is Void Beacon, again, lowering enemy chaos resistance, and they don't have any life regen, really pretty. And then Withering Presence, like I mentioned before, this is again chaos damage over time multiplier being so important for the build's damage output. And then it also afflicts Withered on nearby enemies for 15 seconds. Now this Wither is obviously stacking up to 15 times and stacks together with your Withering Steps and stacks together with your Spreading Rod from the Blight. And they also are hindered, dealing 15% reduced damage over time. So that's pretty smooth. So that's why the enemies are so slowed when you're near them. Leveling this build is obviously not done with Death's Oath. You can level this build with Blight if you want to. You can level this build with any chaos damage over time approach. I would recommend leveling it with whatever you feel like, but I would recommend leveling it as a life-based build. So what I would do if I level this build is not take this path out. I would take the spell damage route out here to Arcanist Dominion and pick up these life nodes, and then go through the 2 points of area into this node to get Cruel Preparation. Now, if I use chaos damage modifiers or spells for leveling, then I would go for corruption, and I would then later go down from here over to this side to get quick recovery, discipline training through retribution to get even more life. And at this point, you'll have a decent amount of HP and you have a decent amount of damage, and you also have the option to go all the way down to Constitution. Now, I personally wouldn't do that. I would rather try to level as a hybrid and try to pick up some extra damage nodes that would also give you energy shield, such as potentially going through to pick up Arcane Focus and Arcane Will to have a bit of pool of energy shield. However, if you use something like a Praxis Ring, you have the availability of going Mind Over Matter pretty easily early on, and Praxis Rings looks like this. And they gave you damage taken gained as mana when you're hit over the last 4 seconds, which allows for low-level characters to spec into Mind Over Matter. The Praxis Rings are like 1 chaos if you want to do that. Very, very smooth leveling experience. Also removes the emphasis on focusing on a lot of life on your gear, allowing mana to cover you, which means you shouldn't reserve too much of your mana pool. Then I would actually just run out, and I would take this route here. If I'm leveling with this type of approach, I would go through the Dexterity node in here and pick up Melding to have hybrid nodes. I would go in here to pick up Written in Blood through this way, and then go down for Cold-Hearted, Lethal, Resourcefulness. I would pick up Growth of Decay, I would pick up Atrophy for damage, go through Entropy, Coordination, down for Method of Madness, and then you're pretty much done with the build. As soon as you go CI, you want to respec out of your life nodes and go for this tree, obviously. Obviously, you don't need Whispers of Doom until you're using Witchfire Brew and Temporal Chains, but as soon as you do, you want to get that as soon as possible to make sure you have 2 curses up in play. And I think that's it. I'm not sure I missed anything out of this build guide showcase for you boys. If you have any questions, do let me know in the comments below. And as always, you know, if you want to see more content and help me out, there's a little thing down below in this video. It's called a like button, and I know you guys can see it. So just hit the button, smash it, and just destroy it. And then somewhere around it, there's a subscribe button. Just click that as well, and there's a little bell that you can ring. Click as well to get notified, and that way you don't miss out on any more build guide showcases. So till next time, boys, stay safe and keep rocking.